My name is Sharon, and I am 56 years old. I was standing in that grand ballroom, wearing the nicest dress I owned, holding a thick envelope and a red velvet box. My daughter had just screamed at me in front of 200 guests. "Get out and do not come back. You are ruining the atmosphere." I simply smiled and said, "Okay, then you probably will not need these." What happened in the next 5 minutes left everyone speechless. Before I share what was inside that envelope and box, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop a comment below with your location. If you have ever felt betrayed by someone, you gave everything to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Have you ever been pushed aside by your own child? Stay with me because this story might just change how you see things. Let me take you back to where it all began. 30 years ago, I became a single mother when Kristen was just 4 years old. Her father walked out on us one Tuesday morning, said he was not ready to be a dad, and never looked back. He left me with a stack of unpaid bills, a tiny rented apartment, and a little girl who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. I worked as a nurse at the county hospital. Most weeks, I pulled double shifts just to make ends meet. I remember coming home at 3 in the morning, my feet aching and my back screaming, only to wake up 3 hours later to make Kristen breakfast before school. There were nights when I ate nothing but crackers and peanut butter, so she could have a proper meal. There were months when I wore the same 2 pairs of scrubs while she had new school clothes. Her father never sent a single dollar in child support, not once in 24 years, but I never spoke ill of him in front of Kristen. I figured she deserved to form her own opinions when she was old enough to understand. I sold my wedding ring to pay for her preschool. I gave up promotions that required travel because I could not leave her alone. Every sacrifice I made willingly because she was my entire world. Kristen was a bright child. She excelled in school, earned a full scholarship to a good university, and graduated with honours. I sat in that auditorium on graduation day, tears streaming down my face, so proud I could barely breathe. All those years of struggle had been worth it. My daughter was going to have the life I never did. After college, Kristen landed a job at a high-end real estate company. She started mingling with wealthy clients, attending fancy events, wearing designer clothes. Slowly, the phone calls became less frequent. She was always in meetings, always entertaining important clients, always too busy. When she did visit, she started making comments about my small house, about the neighborhood, about the outdated furniture. I told myself she was just focused on success. I never imagined she was drifting away from me. 3 years ago, Kristen met Derek at a company gala. He was a lawyer at a prestigious firm, the kind that had offices with skyline views and clients who arrived in chauffeured cars. More importantly, he was the son of Gerald, who owned the largest chain of car dealerships in the region. Money was something Derek had never worried about. The first time I met Derek, he was polite but distant. His eyes scanned my living room in a way that made me feel like I was being appraised. He smiled, but the warmth did not reach his eyes. Still, I told myself not to judge. Maybe he was just reserved. Meeting his parents was a different experience entirely. We had dinner at one of those restaurants where the menu has no prices, where waiters appear and disappear like ghosts. Victoria, Derek's mother, was a retired bank executive. Gerald had built his empire from 3 dealerships to 37. They talked about their recent trip to the Mediterranean, about the yacht they had just purchased, about the renovations on their vacation home in Aspen. Not once did they ask about me. Not once did they seem interested in anything I had to say. When Victoria finally addressed me directly, it was to ask what I did for a living. When I said I was a nurse, she nodded once and immediately changed the subject. Kristen sat there through the entire dinner, laughing at their jokes, agreeing with their opinions, never once defending me or including me in the conversation. On the drive home that night, I gripped the steering wheel and tried to shake off the feeling that I did not belong in my daughter's new world. But I pushed those thoughts aside. As long as Kristen was happy, I could endure anything. I had been enduring things my whole life. What was one more dinner I did not know then that dinner was just the beginning? I did not know that the family who smiled at me across that table would eventually turn my own daughter against me. And I certainly did not know that in 2 years I would be standing in a ballroom being told to leave my child's wedding. When Kristen called to tell me she was engaged, I cried tears of pure joy. My baby girl was getting married. I immediately started asking questions. When was the wedding? Where would it be held? How could I help with the planning? I had dreamed of this moment for years, imagining all the things we would do together to prepare for her big day. But Kristen's answers were hesitant. Victoria had already taken charge of everything she explained. The wedding would be at the country club where Derek's family had been members for 3 generations. The guest list was being handled by a professional coordinator. The theme, the flowers, the music, everything had been decided. I offered to contribute to the costs. It felt wrong not to. But Kristen said Derek's family insisted on covering everything. They wanted it to be perfect, she said, and they had the resources to make it happen. I tried to be understanding. Not every mother gets to plan her daughter's wedding. I told myself I would find other ways to be involved, but the exclusion continued. Victoria took Kristen dress shopping without telling me. I found out through a photo Kristen posted online, the two of them smiling in front of a bridal boutique, champagne glasses in hand. When I called to ask about it, Kristen apologized briefly and said it had been a last-minute thing. Victoria knew the owner and got them a private appointment. The guest list was another blow. Out of over 250 guests, I was allowed to invite 5 people. 5. Victoria said the club had capacity limits, and most of the seats needed to go to important business contacts and family friends. I gave her the names of my closest friends and my sister. That was all I could do. I asked Kristen if I could throw a small bridal shower at my house for our side of the family. She hesitated, then said she did not think it was a good idea. Victoria had already planned an elaborate shower at a vineyard, and having 2 events might seem excessive. I understood, I said, but inside something cracked. One evening, about 2 months before the wedding, Victoria called me directly. Her voice was pleasant, but carried an undertone I could not quite identify. She said she wanted to make sure we were all on the same page about the wedding. She hoped I understood that appearances mattered at these events. She trusted I would dress appropriately and keep my guest list to people who knew how to conduct themselves. She ended by saying she was sure I wanted the day to be perfect just as much as she did. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. I had been politely told to know my place, and the worst part was I accepted it. I told myself Victoria was just particular about details. I told myself it did not matter as long as Kristen's wedding was everything she wanted. But there was one thing I would not give up on. Aunt Patty, my mother's older sister, had left me a set of family jewellery when she passed away 10 years ago. The collection included a pearl necklace with a sapphire pendant, a pair of small diamond earrings, and an intricately engraved silver bracelet. These pieces had been in our family for over 80 years. Every bride in our family had worn them on her wedding day. My mother wore them. I wore them. They were worth around $35,000, but their sentimental value was beyond any price. I mentioned the jewellery to Kristen during one of our rare phone calls. I told her about the tradition, about how much it would mean to me to see her wearing Aunt Patty's necklace as she walked down the aisle. Kristen said she would think about it. Victoria had already arranged jewellery from Tiffany, she explained. She did not want to cause any awkwardness. I held the velvet box that night, looking at the sapphire catching the light. I remembered Aunt Patty fastening this very necklace around my neck on my wedding day, telling me it carried the love of generations. I wondered if my daughter still cared about that kind of love. I wondered if she even remembered where she came from. There is something I never told Kristen, something I had been saving for the right moment. For 28 years, I had been putting money into a separate savings account in her name. Every single month, no matter how tight things were, I deposited at least $100. Some months when I could work extra shifts, I put in more. Some months I ate nothing but ramen noodles for 2 weeks, so I could make that deposit. Over 28 years with compound interest, that account had grown to $75,000. I had planned to give it to Kristen as a wedding gift, a nest egg to start her new life. I imagined her face when she opened the envelope. I imagined telling her about all those years of sacrifice, all those extra shifts, all those meals I skipped. I wrote her a long letter explaining everything about the nights I worked until my hands shook, about the dreams I gave up so she could have better ones. The week before the wedding, there was a rehearsal dinner at the country club. I bought a new dress for the occasion, something modest but elegant. I thought I looked nice when I checked the mirror before leaving. I was wrong. The moment I arrived, I felt eyes on me, not welcoming eyes, measuring eyes. Victoria approached me with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She looked me up and down and asked if this was what I planned to wear to the actual wedding. I explained this was just for the rehearsal. She nodded slowly and said she hoped I had something more suitable for Saturday. During the rehearsal, I was informed that I would be seated in the 3rd row during the ceremony. The front row was reserved for Derek's immediate family. The 2nd row was for his extended family and godparents. I, the mother of the bride, would be behind all of them. When I questioned this arrangement, the wedding coordinator looked uncomfortable and said it was what had been requested. Kristen was standing nearby. She heard everything. She said nothing. She just looked at the ground and nodded along with whatever the coordinator said. That night, I called my friend Gina. We had worked together at the hospital for 15 years before I had to retire early due to health issues. Gina was the kind of friend who always told me the truth, even when I did not want to hear it. She was furious on my behalf. She said Kristen was allowing those people to walk all over me. She said money did not give anyone the right to treat another human being like they were less than. She asked if I was really going to give $75,000 to someone who could not even save me a front row seat at her own wedding. I told her I had to. This was my daughter. This was everything I had saved for her entire life. Gina went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You have the biggest heart of anyone I know. I just hope Kristen deserves it." Gina's son Marcus was a professional photographer. By coincidence, he had been hired to cover Kristen's wedding. He promised Gina he would keep an eye on things for me. I thanked her and said I hoped it would not be necessary. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my living room. The thick envelope containing the check and my letter sat on the coffee table. Beside it was the red velvet box with Aunt Patty's jewellery. I had prepared both gifts with so much love. I had imagined this moment for years. Kristen opening the envelope, gasping at the amount, reading my letter with tears in her eyes. Kristen opening the velvet box, understanding the weight of tradition, asking me to help her put on the necklace. I went to bed that night with hope in my heart. By this time tomorrow, I thought everything would be perfect. I could not have been more wrong. I woke at 5 in the morning on my daughter's wedding day. Sleep had been impossible. I spent an hour getting ready, carefully applying makeup, styling my hair, putting on the navy blue dress I had purchased with 2 months of savings. I looked at myself in the mirror and took a deep breath. Today was about Kristen. Whatever happened, I would smile and be supportive. I arrived at the country club early, hoping to see Kristen before the ceremony. A staff member stopped me at the entrance to the bridal suite. The bride had requested no visitors, she said. She was preparing with her bridal party and did not want to be disturbed. I asked if she could at least tell Kristen her mother was here. The staff member disappeared inside, then returned with the same message. No visitors. I tried calling Kristen's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I sent a text message wishing her a beautiful day. No response. I found a bench in the garden and sat there watching guests arrive in expensive cars, greeting each other with air kisses and champagne. Victoria walked past me at one point. She was wearing a stunning silver gown, her hair perfectly coiffed diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. She acknowledged me with a brief nod. Nothing more. Gerald did not even look in my direction. They swept into the venue like royalty, while I sat on my bench like a forgotten afterthought. The ceremony began at 4 in the afternoon. I found my seat in the third row behind Derek's aunts and uncles and cousins, behind people whose names I did not know. The music started and everyone turned to watch the entrance. And then I saw her. My Kristen. My baby girl. She was breathtaking in her white gown, her face radiant behind the delicate veil. But she was not walking alone. Gerald Derek's father had her arm looped through his. He was the one escorting her down the aisle. No one had told me about this. No one had asked my opinion. Kristen had simply decided that since her biological father was not present, her future father-in-law would fill that role. As if I did not exist, as if I had not been both mother and father to her for 24 years. I watched her walk past my row without a glance. Her eyes were fixed forward on Derek, on her new family. The sapphire pendant I had hoped to see was not around her neck. Instead, she wore a glittering diamond necklace, brand new, obviously from Victoria. I pressed my lips together and blinked back tears. This was not the time to fall apart. The ceremony was beautiful. The vows were touching. I watched my daughter become someone's wife, and I felt the complicated mix of joy and grief that I imagine every mother feels at such moments. But there was something else too, a coldness, a distance, as if I were watching a stranger marry another stranger. The reception began in the grand ballroom. I looked at the seating chart and found my name at table 17 near the back corner of the room with people I had never met. Derek's colleagues, business contacts, strangers. I spent the first hour of the reception alone at that table watching my daughter dance with Derek, pose for photos with Victoria and Gerald, laugh with her new in-laws as if they had known her all her life. Every time I tried to approach her, something or someone was in the way. She was greeting important guests. She was doing the cake cutting. She was throwing the bouquet. Finally, I saw an opening. Kristen was standing with a group of her bridesmaids, champagne in hand, looking relaxed for the first time all day. I walked over the envelope and velvet box, clutched carefully in my hands. This was my moment. This was when I would give her everything I had saved, everything our family had treasured for generations. I touched her shoulder gently. "Kristen, sweetheart," I said, "I wanted to give you your wedding gifts." She turned around, and I saw something in her eyes that made my heart stutter. Annoyance. Her cheeks were flushed, probably from the champagne. Derek materialized beside her, his hand possessive on her waist. He whispered something in her ear, and then my daughter said words I will never forget. "Mum, you need to stop following me around. You are embarrassing me." I stood frozen. I could not have heard correctly. I asked her what she meant. Victoria appeared from somewhere, her smile sharp as glass. "I think it would be best if you returned to your table," she said. "This is not the time." But Kristen was not finished. Her voice rose loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "Get out," she said. "You are ruining the atmosphere. Just leave, the conversations around us died." I could feel eyes turning toward us guests, craning their necks to see what the commotion was about. My daughter stood there, face twisted with something I did not recognize telling me to leave her wedding. For a moment, I could not breathe. 30 years. 30 years of sacrifice, of love, of putting her needs before my own. And this was how she repaid me. But then something shifted inside me. The shock faded, and in its place came a strange calm. I had spent my entire life giving everything to this girl, and she had just shown me exactly how much that meant to her. I looked down at the envelope in my hand. $75,000. 28 years of skipped meals and extra shifts and worn-out shoes. Then I looked at the velvet box. 4 generations of family love. I looked back at my daughter and I smiled. "Okay," I said. My voice was steady. "Then you probably will not need this envelope and gift." Kristen blinked. Victoria frowned. Derek's confident smirk faltered slightly. I opened the envelope slowly, making sure everyone nearby could see. I pulled out the check, holding it up so the light caught the numbers written across it. "This," I said, "is a check for $75,000. The murmuring around us stopped completely. 28 years, I continued. For 28 years, I saved every penny I could. I worked double shifts. I ate ramen for dinner so I could put money away. I never bought myself new clothes. I never took vacations. All so I could give my daughter something to start her new life." I looked directly at Kristen. Her face had gone pale. And then I tore the check in half. Someone gasped. I think it might have been Victoria. I tore it again and again. The pieces fell from my fingers like confetti, drifting down to the polished floor of that grand ballroom. Kristen found her voice. "Mum, what are you doing?" "I am doing what you asked," I said calmly. "You told me to leave. You told me I was ruining your atmosphere. So I am taking my gifts with me." I held up the red velvet box and opened it. Inside, Aunt Patty's jewellery caught the light. The sapphire glowing deep blue, the diamonds sparkling like stars. I heard Victoria inhale sharply. Even she could recognise quality when she saw it. "This necklace," I said, "has been in my family for over 80 years. My great-grandmother wore it. My grandmother wore it. My mother wore it on her wedding day. I wore it on mine. It is worth approximately $35,000, but its real value cannot be measured in money." I paused, looking at Kristen. "I was going to give it to you today. I was going to continue the tradition. But traditions are meant for people who honour where they come from." I closed the box with a soft click. "This will go to someone who deserves it, someone who understands what family means, and clearly that is not you." Kristen's eyes were wet now. "Mum, I did not know about the money. I did not understand." "No," I said, "you did not, because you never asked. You never cared enough to wonder why I still drove a 15-year-old car while you wore designer clothes. You never thought about where you came from once you found people you thought were better." Derek stepped forward, his face red. "Now hold on a minute, you cannot just come in here and create a scene like this." I turned to face him. "Young man," I said, keeping my voice level, "I have nothing to say to you. You had every opportunity to encourage my daughter to treat her mother with respect. Instead, you stood by while she pushed me aside. That tells me everything I need to know about you." Victoria was sputtering now. "This is outrageous. This is a wedding. How dare you create such drama over money?" I faced her next. "This was never about money," I said. "This was about respect. Something you seem to think can be bought. You spent the last 2 years teaching my daughter that I was not good enough for your family. Well, congratulations. You succeeded. But she was my daughter first, and what you have turned her into breaks my heart." I tucked the velvet box into my purse and looked around the room. 200 faces stared back at me, silent, watching. I walked past Gerald on my way out. He stood there with his mouth open, unable to formulate words. I stopped beside him just long enough to say, "Fancy cars and expensive suits do not make a man. Remember that when you are wondering why people respect you to your face, but talk about you behind your back." Then I walked out of that ballroom. The late afternoon sun hit my face as I stepped outside. Behind me, I could hear the chaos beginning. Kristen crying, Victoria shouting orders, Derek trying to calm guests down. I walked to my car, got in and locked the doors. And only then, in the silence and privacy of my old sedan, did I let myself cry. Not because I regretted what I did, but because I had finally stopped pretending. I had finally stood up for myself, and it had cost me my daughter. In the week following the wedding, my phone rang constantly. I did not answer. Kristen called at least 20 times a day at first. Her messages evolved as the days passed. First came the anger. How could you do that to me? You ruined my wedding. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Then came the bargaining. Mum, please call me back. We need to talk about this. I did not mean what I said, Derek called once, his voice dripping with condescension. He demanded that I apologize for causing a scene and disrupting their special day. I let him speak for about 30 seconds, then simply said, "There is nothing to discuss," and I hung up. Victoria sent a lengthy text message accusing me of being vindictive and jealous. She said I had always resented their family's success. She said I had deliberately sabotaged the wedding because I could not stand seeing Kristen happy. I read the message once, then deleted it without responding. But here is what surprised me. I was not alone. Gina came over the next day with wine and pizza, just as she had done during every crisis in our friendship. She had already heard everything from Marcus, who had captured the entire confrontation on camera. The other photographers and staff had been gossiping about it all evening, she said. Half of them were horrified. The other half thought I was a legend. I laughed for the first time in days. A legend. Not exactly how I imagined being remembered. Word spread quickly in our small community. At first, I worried about what people would think. A mother causing a scene at her own daughter's wedding. It sounded terrible. But as the details emerged, as people learned about the third row seating and the exclusion from planning and the years of subtle disrespect, the narrative shifted. Old friends reached out. Some I had not heard from in years. They wanted to check on me, to tell me I had done the right thing, to share their own stories of family disappointment. My sister called from across the country and talked to me for 3 hours, something we had not done since we were teenagers. The people from my church stopped by with casseroles and flowers. Pastor Thomas came for tea one afternoon and told me that standing up for one's dignity was never a sin, even when it hurt. I was not alone. I had built a community over 5 decades of life, and that community was rallying around me. The family I thought I had lost turned out to be smaller than I feared and larger than I had imagined. 2 weeks after the wedding, an email arrived from Kristen. It was long, much longer than any message she had sent me in years. She apologized for what happened, blamed it on the stress and the champagne and the pressure of the day. She said Victoria had been furious that the honeymoon had been tense, that Derek was upset about the gossip. Then she asked about the money. She wondered if I might consider writing a new check. They were planning to buy a house, she explained, and the down payment was challenging. She also asked about the jewellery. She had looked it up online and realised how valuable it was. She thought it would be perfect for her anniversary photos. I read that email 3 times. I was looking for something, some sign that my daughter understood what she had done wrong. Some indication that her apology was about more than money and appearances. I did not find it. She was not sorry for hurting me. She was sorry for the consequences. She was sorry that the people at the wedding had witnessed her cruelty. She was sorry that the money and jewellery were now out of reach. I closed my laptop without responding. Some lessons could not be taught with words. Some lessons had to be lived. The months after the wedding were strange. I had spent 30 years defining myself as Kristen's mother. Every decision, every sacrifice, every dream had been filtered through that identity. And suddenly, I had to figure out who Sharon was without that role. It was terrifying at first. The silence in my house felt oppressive. I would catch myself reaching for the phone to call Kristen, then remembering that I had nothing to say, that she was ready to hear. Gina saved me, as she had so many times before. She insisted I use some of the money I had saved, the money that was no longer going to Kristen, to finally do something for myself. She pointed out that I had never taken a real vacation. I had never prioritized my own happiness. Maybe it was time to start. So, in March, Gina and I flew to Arizona and spent a week hiking the Grand Canyon. I had dreamed of seeing it since I was a little girl, looking at pictures in National Geographic. Standing on that rim, watching the sunset paint the rocks in shades of orange and gold, I felt something I had not felt in a long time: peace. I came home and joined a gardening group at the community centre. I met women my age who had lived full, complicated lives. We talked about our children, our disappointments, our joys. I learned that I was not the only mother who had sacrificed everything only to feel discarded. I learned that healing was possible even from the deepest wounds. I started writing in a journal. Every evening I sat on my back porch with a cup of tea and wrote down my thoughts. I wrote about Kristen, about our history, about the hopes I had carried and the pain I had endured. I wrote about my own mother, who had died when Kristen was a baby, and how much I wished she were here to guide me. I wrote about the future I wanted, even if I did not know exactly what it looked like. Slowly, something shifted. The grief was still there, but it no longer consumed me. The anger faded into something softer, something that felt more like sadness than rage. I began to understand that I could love my daughter and still refuse to accept her treatment of me. Those two truths could exist together. I reconnected with my sister in California. We made plans for her to visit in the spring, something we had been promising each other for a decade but never followed through on. I realized how many relationships I had neglected while pouring all my energy into Kristen. There was a whole world of people who cared about me, and I had barely noticed them. 6 months after the wedding, I received a different kind of message from Kristen. Not an email this time. A handwritten letter delivered by regular mail. She asked if we could meet in person, just the two of us. She said she had things she needed to say, and she wanted to say them face to face. I thought about it for 2 days before responding. I agreed to meet, but I chose the location: a park near my house, public and neutral. I would not return to being the accommodating mother who bent to everyone else's preferences. Kristen arrived alone, and she looked different, thinner, tired. The confident woman who had stood in that ballroom telling me to leave was gone. In her place was someone who seemed uncertain, even fragile. We sat on a bench near the pond, watching ducks glide across the water. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Kristen started talking. She told me about her marriage, about Victoria's constant interference, criticizing everything from her cooking to her decorating to her career choices. About Derek, who always sided with his mother, who dismissed Kristen's feelings as overreacting. She said she finally understood what it felt like to be made to feel small, to be treated as if her opinions did not matter. She cried when she told me she was sorry, really sorry, not just sorry about the consequences. She said she had been so desperate to fit into Derek's world that she had forgotten who she was. She had let them turn her into someone she did not recognize. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I asked her one question: "Were you ashamed of me?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded her face, crumpling with fresh tears. "Yes," she whispered, "I was, and I hate myself for it." I let that confession sit between us. It hurt to hear, but it also explained everything. I did not say I forgave her. I was not ready for that, and I did not want to lie. Instead, I said something else. "I love you, Kristen. That will never change. But I cannot go back to being the mother who accepts any treatment just to keep you close. If we are going to rebuild this relationship, it has to be different." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. I want that too." I told her my boundaries. I would not be treated as less important than her in-laws. I would not be excluded or spoken to with disrespect. If she wanted me in her life, she had to show me with her actions, not just her words. As for the jewelry, I said it is still mine. It will stay mine until I see that you truly understand its value, not its price, its meaning. She accepted everything without argument. We parted that day with a tentative hug. It was not the warm embrace of a mother and daughter who had resolved everything. It was the careful touch of two people who were trying to find their way back to each other. A year has passed since that terrible wedding day. Kristen and I talk on the phone every week now. She visits on her own sometimes without Derek, and we have coffee and conversation like we used to years ago. She has started setting boundaries with Victoria, and it has caused tension in her marriage. But she says she would rather have tension than lose herself completely. I am not naive. I know things may never be what they once were. The little girl who used to curl up beside me and beg for bedtime stories is gone. In her place is a grown woman who made choices that hurt me deeply. But she is also a woman who is trying to change, and I have learned that people deserve the chance to grow even when they have failed us. The $75,000 I had saved is no longer sitting in an account waiting for Kristen. I used some of it to travel. I went to the ocean for the first time in 20 years. I took a pottery class and discovered I have no talent whatsoever, but I loved every minute of it. I donated a portion to the hospital where I worked for so many years to help nurses who are struggling the way I once struggled. The rest I am keeping for myself, for my future, for whatever comes next. Aunt Patty's jewellery is still in my safe. Kristen knows it is there. She has not asked about it again. I think she understands now that some things cannot be demanded. They must be earned. Last Christmas was quiet but warm. Kristen came for dinner, just the two of us and Gina. We cooked together in my small kitchen, laughing when the gravy turned out lumpy, savouring the simple joy of being together without pretense. It was not perfect, but it was real. I have learned something this past year that I wish I had understood earlier. Loving your children does not mean erasing yourself. Sacrificing for them does not mean you have no right to dignity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand up and say enough. Not to punish them, but to show them that everyone, including you, deserves respect. I do not know what the future holds for Kristen and me. I do not know if she will stay married to Derek or find her own path. I do not know if Victoria will ever see me as anything other than an inconvenience, but I know this. I will never again sit in the third row at my own life. I will never again accept crumbs when I deserve a seat at the table. And I will never, ever apologize for demanding to be treated like the person I am. If you are watching this and you have been through something similar, I want you to know you are not alone. So many of us have given everything to our children only to feel pushed aside when they no longer need us. So many of us have stayed silent to keep the peace, swallowed our hurt, to avoid conflict, shrunk ourselves to make others comfortable. You do not have to do that anymore. I would love to hear your story. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself with your own family? Have you ever had a moment when you finally said enough? Leave a comment below and share your experience. We can support each other. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss stories like this one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we are not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for listening to my story. Whatever you are going through, I hope you find the strength to stand up for yourself. I hope you find people who love you the way you deserve to be loved. And I hope you never forget that your worth does not depend on how others treat you. Take care of yourselves. And remember, it is never too late to start a new chapter.